We talked a bit about the program before. You told me you wouldn't curate the films like this, or you wouldn't put them together in that order. I'm not sure what you meant exactly. Maybe we can.
That's not what I said. I said it's interesting that you put those together, and I'm not sure why. That's something different.
How came you doubt it?
Yeah, maybe Dea can elaborate on that more.
Maybe not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Shall we hear Skadi's explanation first?
Maybe I'll start with my original impression from a couple of days ago when I saw it the first time.
Maybe you can also talk about whether it changed now that you have seen it. Yeah.
Not much, no.
Okay.
Because I mean that's the beauty of curating, right? You see 3 films, at least that's how my mind works. You try to make sense of the individual films, and then you try to make sense of how they go together. And I really like each of the films separately in itself. And, you know, we'll hopefully talk about them individually. But then you try to think how they actually go together. And I can see certain connections, obviously, but not like more with the first and the feature, and also with the maybe harder with the second one and the feature. Just not, I don't know, I can't bring them all together, like all 3 of them, because I feel like the way they relate is very different. And then you also threw in the title of the program, Libertine, which to me doesn't really make sense yet. But maybe you guys can, throughout the conversation, maybe not right now, elaborate how that comes in. But yeah, so that was my thought process, and I don't know.
Just maybe to understand better, you said bringing together the films. Could we just dig a little deeper what that might mean, like bringing them together?
You mean in general, or like the individual films?
Well, you just described you were not sure whether you could bring them together. I would just like to understand a little better what you mean by that, or
yeah. Are they connected somehow for you?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, in a program, in a curated program, that's what I would look for. What is the connection? And you know, is the connection something that goes with the title or not, or what is it? Like the to be very concrete, like the first one seems to me, you know, it's a found footage film trying to retell a story in a feminist way, with very particular kinds of film fragments, and you know, that's one particular kind of film and particular kind of storytelling in itself. And that would also be, to me, some sort of a connection to the main film, because with the main, like with the feature film, I really found super interesting the way the animation shifts, and the way it's like it's super artistic, and the craft you can see is just amazing. And also it's, to me, a very meta artistic film that, like, it brings you back. And you know, the first the first minute or so, where it says, and we go back and further and longer and longer and longer ago, and it flips and flips and flips and flips into other different kinds of animation formats, which is pretty amazing, I think. And then later, you know, it tells the story of, okay, it's actually about the no theater, certain traditional theater type. And to tell that story in film, in animation, seems very amazing to me. Like for instance, the pop concert, then meta reference, like also going through different kinds of film and music genres in that. For instance, the whale segment where they have the big show about the whale and how the whale is actually projected as if there would be VJing nowadays. But it's also, it tells you in the form of a animation how that has been or could have been done back then, which is pretty
Isn't
amazing.
it great? Yeah, I like that scene a lot.
And so those kind of things go together for me, like with the Argentinian short and this one, that they're very particular about different times and different artistic structures in film to tell,
Narratives.
yeah, yeah, but also aesthetically, like bringing different aesthetics into different times to then retell or re-narrate or renegotiate stories. So in that way, those films go really super well together for me. But the Jan Soldat, I don't quite know yet. I like that one also a lot. I think it's very funny. But I don't know, like my imagination, why you might have put that together is to make the feature film read stronger as a gay subtext version or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, we can collect speculations a little, and then we see whether we have answers to that. I think Petra, me, and Dea also have all different answers, so we can't present you a coherent whole. I'm sorry to disappoint. I think it's pretty, like, maybe talking about Athul's film, which is based, of course, all on film excerpts. Like in the end of the film, you saw that really long list of films she used to reconstruct an event from which no images exist. And actually, what we just talked about, the No Theater and the feature, it's quite fascinating that, of course, the events depicted in the film haven't happened like that. It's a reinterpretation of history, changing it, or reinterpretation of the events as a rock musical, of course. So I guess, yeah, there's so many layers to explore. Maybe we start. Maybe we continue with Jasper, who has also not been here in the cinema with us, but he has seen the films. I'm not sure if in the right, like what is the right order, but the curated order. You haven't seen them in the way we just saw them, right? You've seen them in a different order.
No, that's what I was going to say. I mean, obviously, my experience watching them at home out of the order presented is different from sitting in an auditorium and consuming it in that way. I mean, I too am sort of curious about the putting them together. I think with a program, you know, you always have like individual films. Your choices generally tend to throw light on the other choices. It makes you look at the other films in a different light. I can see the connection again between Stonebreakers and INU-OH, in that they're both like revisiting and reclaiming a part of a history, a cultural history which had national ramifications, I think, and it had, you know, but you're recreating it from something which didn't exist before. I mean, certainly there's no, you know, authentic film footage from the times, the origins of No, that goes without saying. I mean, I think they go together quite well, whereas the second one, I mean, it's a very different politically. It's looking at something, again, a hidden history, but it's something a lot more intimate and a lot more confined within the boundaries of its setting. I think it's not rewriting a national history as such, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Talking about national history, I'm also very interested in your I think it's also very interesting how we see a program, because we bring a certain knowledge about particular films. Like about some of them, we might already know much more than about the others. And Jasper, in your case, you've been dealing with Japanese cinema a lot, so you probably can decipher many more references in that film than I, for example, could.
Yeah.
So how did that influence the way you saw that program? Like, was it like this film you could really dig into and the others were kind of getting lost on the way? Or
Yeah, it's a really rich film, and I think it works very well just as a piece of bombastic entertainment. It's really flamboyant stylistically. It's really expressive. I think where it got me at the beginning when it was talking at the Battle of Dannemora, which was, you know, the battle between the Genji and the Taira or the Heike clans, which had this massive, ended the sort of imperial system in Japan, and you entered that whole era of the shogunate. So it was a massive political upheaval. I was getting the reference, I'm sure you know the film, but Masaki Kobayashi's Kwaidan, the 1964 ghost anthology, where they have a segment called Hoichi the Earless, and it's about a blind biwa player who has to go to a shrine every night and perform to the ghosts of the Heike, the defeated Heike clan. And they end up sort of in a rage, and he's told he has to paint Buddhist characters on his face or they will attack him. And he paints tattoos, all these Buddhist sutras all over his body, and leaves off his ears, and the ghosts rip off his ears. So that's, you know, brings in that whole sort of biwa, you know, a lot of the early biwa playing and no theatre came out of the aftermath of that sort of decisive, well, basically a civil war in Japan. I could go into more detail. I mean, I know a bit about no theatre. I've sat through a no theatre performance before. I know a bit about the history. It does reference it. I mean, I think basically what you're seeing is No began as a sort of peasant, sort of outcast theatre that was performed on a lake, by the lakes outside, you know, by the sort of peasants. And it absorbed lots of influences, musical influences, foreign influences, and it was like a variety performance. And then over the years, it got more and more formalized and has settled into this sort of atrophied sort of very, I mean, if you've sat at a no theatre, you'll know it goes on for like, you know, 4 hour long, people barely move, they have the masks, and it's all to do with the delivery of the words. It's not this sort of flamboyant form that we saw in the film, but I guess that's what I liked about the film, the idea that you have this outcast coming in, performing like a sort of biwa playing Iggy Pop almost, you know, sort of pansexual being, getting all the attention, and then being on the wrong side of politics of the day. So and that's how a whole strain of what could have evolved into has sort of been carved out of history.
do you, a question comes to mind, sorry for being present, too present maybe, but I'm too curious, sorry. Like, I'd love to know from you, like, do you feel drawn to a film when it deals with something you already know much about, like from an emotional angle?
I got to say, my tastes, I mean, I've been watching Japanese films for years, so, but my tastes aren't really the period dramas because Japanese history is so complicated. So I only know, I mean, I certainly, if you know a little bit, it enriches the experience a lot. But I think you can take a lot of them at face value, but, you know, a Japanese audience would read that in a very different way than the foreign audience. So there's really interesting stuff in there. I mean, I'm really interested by the way the animated medium, you know, you've got this medium where the director can basically control every single image, and there's lots of nice little details there. There's a bit of trivia, the bit where he's on the boat at the beginning and the crab crawls up his arm, and did you know that there is this particular type of crab in Japan called the Heike crab, which is basically, they have this pattern on their back which looks like a face, and there's this mythology that they are the ghosts of the fallen warriors from the Battle of Dannemora. So fishermen would never eat them, they would just throw them back into the water, and there's this theory that there was some sort of selective breeding so that the ones that look the most like the faces would pass on their genes, and you'd have another generation that would have more accurate faces. So somehow it evolves where these crabs have faces on their backs, and you've got this distinct species, but it ties in with that sort of mythology there. So I love the way there's little nuances like that, which I think people in Japan would get, these little superstitions, which are really tiny. I think, you know, tiny little throwaway moments we probably wouldn't pick up on.
But what I liked, I mean, you watched that film probably very differently than me, but what I liked is also very much Western or international pop rock culture in the musical culture. Like you have the Moon Dance in there, you have Queen, We Will Rock You in there, you have ballet in there, you have pretty much everything in there. And in the end, the green eyes, that's like the Joker. Like so many references that are just pop culture also that I find super interesting also in there.
I mean, I've loved, I mean, I saw US's first film, Mind Game, remember about, well, when it came out 2004, and that is just this weird mashup. I mean, there's no real story, so to speak. I mean, it's just about a guy who, him and his girlfriend fleeing the Yakuza and get swallowed by his giant whale and end up in the stomach of a whale and just play all
Again, a whale, right?
Yeah, and it's just, but it's just this weird sort of psychedelic sort of, you know, there's a whole section where they're just wasting time playing all these silly games just to relieve the tedium of living in a whale's stomach. And it's just this amazing mix up of styles, and he's just got such a great visual imagination. So what I think there's the two things going in tandem there. You've got his amazing sort of drawing on all these different areas of pop culture, and the sort of more history-based thing. But I mean, like I say, the actual representation of No theatre is nothing like what No as we would know it to this day. But he does, I mean, there's some lovely, you know, like the sort of ink brushed landscapes he throws in there as well, you know, that sort of refer to the art of the period, and then coupled with, you know, We Will Rock You.
Yeah, how are you? You watched the program today at home, I think, again. I hope it worked all with the web connection. What do you think about it? Do you still like the program, and are you a fan of whales?
No, it's just so interesting to hear like what I did not really like, you know, think about while watching the films. And of course I don't know as much about Japanese theater or like history. When I mean, I do know something, of course, but it's a very complex subject, so I don't know much about it. But for me, I think I'm still I still believe in my initial reason why we decided to put these films together, and why we really like wanted to show these films like in the program. And even more now, when I hear such different interpretations of like why, like, and of the reasons, like I believe more in the decision that we made, because the films are really, for me, they don't have much in common maybe, but for me they're also really connected to each other. I don't know if I should talk about it yet, but
Yes.
Why
yes.
not?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we wait for you to be the first to talk about it.
So for me, it's I was really curious to think or to see directors' approach, each director's approach to the subject, and to work with the material, and to work with the theme of the films also, because they're very personal for me, for each director, and as much as they deal with subjects that are like history, national history, for example, they're also so personal. Like it's such a personal, unique vision for me in each 3 films. And in the second film, in particular, for me, it deals with them. It's more universal for me than other 2 films, because it deals with the human, like personal history, which is for me, it's maybe easier to connect with because it's so universal. Like I don't even need to think maybe about knowing anything at all. I'm just there with these people in a room. So the films are really connected in that way for me, like with freedom that each director has in their ways of expression and how they approach the subjects.
I think this idea of like the curated program, sometimes it sounds like really final, you know, but sometimes it's also dependent on how much time you have to actually talk about the decision, which I find really interesting because like when we program for Critics Week, and sometimes we cannot finish because we lack time. And then we meet again and we talk about a program and then we might change it again. So sometimes they just transform after a while. And also with this one, I think we had some time to talk about it, but not like endlessly. And also, for example, to you, Dea, I still also have some questions, which we couldn't talk about, which is very interesting. For example, when we spoke about the films, I think you described them as being like very cinematic. And I'd really love to talk more about that, like what it means for you and how you can connect it to those films. Yeah.
I think because like, this is the first time I curated with like I was part of curation of like any program. So and maybe because like for me the main connection with any film is emotional, and also like I was just naive. Like I was like I wanted to be each of the directors in a way. Like I wanted to be the one who would make that film in a way because it was just so like cinematic, like in terms of like individual very unique language that each director has, that I could not and we had actually a lot of discussions about it. Like for example with animation, I was instantly just blown away. Like I knew that this film somehow needs to be part of the program because first, like I really love animation, then it's not that often represented in programs that do not have other animations maybe, and they're usually put aside in different like in separate programs. But for me there is no separation between animation and like found footage or documentary. For me it's just cinema, like everything. And I wanted to see this and especially in animation you have infinite I don't know, possibility for freedom and to control the material and to work with it. And then maybe also coming from post-Soviet country, I have very specific love for animation, maybe because of that. But I did not know like how could it play with any other films in a way which I was given to watch. But I was sure that it just needs to be part of the program because it's, I think it's just a brilliant film and very inspiring one for me. And for me, that matters. Like if I watch the film and then I want to show it to everyone in a way, then that's for me a reason in a way to like show it, to use this opportunity to at least present it to the audience, like in Critics Week.
Can you guys explain to me and everybody else? Like, okay, so it sounds like you had the feature and you loved it and then you wanted something else with it. So to not make no? Okay.
Well, we started from the feature and Jan's film.
Jan's film, yes. I was like very impressed and immediately really in love with Jan's film. So.
And so what was the pool of films? Like
yeah, transparency, also interesting. Yeah, rarely seen at festivals, but so we had a selection process for Critics Week with a long list of films, and we had already worked on that list a lot and found some darlings, kind of. And when we met Dea, she was like, you know, I'm very curious what you have seen, and I want to watch them as well. And let's choose something from your list of favorite films. So there was a long list
how
of...
did you get to the favorite films? Is that purely scouted or submissions, or how does it work?
Well, we are not under a lot of pressure at Critics Week, so we tend to ask people for what they have seen, what inspired them, what they would like to be in a discussion about, or what they would like to see discussed, what could spark conversations about cinema or what cinema is, and then we end up with a list of films.
It doesn't have to be a premiere or anything.
No such strict rules. We just like to show new films usually, but we don't follow
No strict rules, but rules.
We don't follow the rules all the time. For example, on Wednesday we will show a film which we also curated with some filmmakers together, and they didn't want to show new films necessarily, so it's breaking the rule a bit. Yeah. No.
But anyway, we didn't agree in all the films, actually, just to let you know. So we made a list and everybody had its favorites, and in the end we talked about it, and so we came to a compromise, which I think it's an interesting program to discuss about. So I think this was a starting point why this program ended up like that, what I would say. I said I wouldn't actually have done the program like that, but I said that I'm very happy to talk about that. So I would have seen maybe some other films, which I think that was one of my favorite films, which I thought would fit better. But anyway, so I don't know whether I can talk about the films we didn't show, but
I think nobody knows them, so it's not so helpful. Probably.
So, but I agreed on that choice.
So you wanted to talk about our title, huh, Skadi?
Yeah.
It's interesting talking about rules, like the rules of how to curate a program, or like the rules which films we can use to curate a program, and how we can break them, or whether we should.
I mean, it's the first animation film which the Berlin Critics Week shows. This is, for example, one point we can say here, no? So this is already like an exception, no? Didn't you say that? I mean, you said in the past when we were talking about whether feature films or animation films, because you said there that an animation film, you regard an animation film as the same as a feature, normal or live action feature film, whatever. So, I mean, one point is that it's the first animation film shown here in Critics Week. So is this something like something special for you, Dennis?
For me?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, but I think these divisions are like, I'm thinking about these categories, right? Because we already talked about whether this category means a lot, like whether it's an animated film or not, or a documentary or not. Like, I think these are all like learned categories we have internalized from the events we attended, I think. Or is this festival culture defining what cinema is, or which kind of cinema exists? Like, what would you say to that?
Production culture, I would say. No?
Production culture.
Well, I would say that's very film studies. And maybe also film economy, as in which kind of, where is it going to go distribute, where is it going to show up? Maybe funding also. So yeah, production culture as well. I personally would not say it's festival culture. My experience with festivals, but maybe we talked about that before. Maybe I'm in the privileged position having worked for and with queer film festivals for a really long time. So to me, this would not at all be weird on any level. The kind of program we just saw, like the mix of different styles and different, also have like, like very different kinds of films, and making me think hard why you put those together is not anything that would like surprise me or annoy me. It's just, still doesn't mean I exactly know why, but it's definitely interesting, and it's interesting to think about the connections, maybe beyond what Dea thought about them when she saw them, and that she is envious of the filmmakers making those films. But no. So to me, that's not a big difference, like whether it's animation in a festival or not, or also to me, this is a very queer feminist program, which makes sense to go together in that aspect. But yeah.
But still, you mentioned, for example, the second film. For you, it kind of doesn't fit in so much. So there's some kind of...
Yeah, but maybe that's also my issue, because we talked about like, what do you bring to a program? What do you bring to a film? And I've seen several other films by Jan, and to me, they were very similar. And like, I don't know, the first ones I saw more than 10 years ago in a very similar style. And so in that respect, it wasn't that surprising to me. And I guess maybe that's like the background, or where I'm like, okay, I put that in a certain kind of box, maybe, and then have those two other films with it, but yeah, surprising in a way, or I'm still trying to process how they connect, because I don't know, like I said, I really like Jan's film in the way it seems to be very ordinary. It's kind of like either the beauty or the horror of ordinariness, and seems to me that's like the anti-porn of like gay cinema. So there are a lot of qualities in there. I just, doesn't exactly resonate with the other two films just yet. And also not so much with the Libertine. Like what's the special, what's the breaking the rules, what's the, or, but maybe that's me knowing his films for really a while already and not being like so surprised or shocked or whatever.
One thing I thought about during the screening, which like I hadn't thought about before, but like we've talked a lot about this Klimt picture in Jan's film being on the wall, like it's above the couch, like, and we have this Klimt picture there, which is kind of symbolic for a negotiation of beauty. I think of course he didn't put it there. He was just there with them, and the picture was there. And I thought during the screening, I thought so much about like how can like a definition of beauty not be based on a photographic image, and then afterwards comes the animated film, and it feels so connected to that image being there in the room. It was just a really random association I had, but I thought like
I didn't see that picture at all. Like
Yeah,
it didn't register with me at all. I was surprised with all the bathroom breaks. I found that interesting.
So, like, what kind of connection needs to be? I mean, like, I'm a bit confused actually, maybe because I'm not used to doing this as often as everyone else. Like, I just wonder what would be considered to be a real connection between these three films.
I mean, we started this idea of asking directors to program because we're interested as well in the idea. So what do directors think about when curators curate a program? So actually this is something, because some directors might not agree on which films they have been programmed. So I hope in this case everything is fine with them. Nobody said anything against it yet. So, but this was actually the idea behind when we were thinking about asking directors. And therefore a question for you would be there. So is it interesting, or is it important to you to know how your films will be programmed or are programmed in the past?
No, honestly,
Okay.
when I go to watch the films, honestly, to see something shocking or I have never seen, like I'm not sure we can actually see that many films which would be that innovative. Like, but I don't watch films also for that. For me, it's like really what matters is how the film is actually made. Like, and Jan's films, which I also started to watch, for example, I actually enjoy that he makes films in a way in the same manner. And because like for how long actually can you also do that and still make films that are so like interesting for me personally, like to watch. But maybe I look at it from a different perspective, and I don't look at it as a director. I think I just look at it as just a regular like viewer. Like I just love watching films, and but my film, it can be programmed anywhere. Like the only thing which I usually don't really like when it's programmed specifically like in very one direction, kind of like we only show these films which talk about this subject, like that is a bit which I think limiting for the film, like in my opinion, because then like you kind of tell the audience what to expect and why to watch the film. And I would not want to know why I need to watch any film.
My personal connection in these films are, although I appreciate, for example, Jan films as a documentary, although I don't, well, I'm not so much interested in this sort of documentary, because when it comes to authenticity or reality, I prefer to have maybe then a more something I could really afterwards think about what I've seen, and maybe I need more explanation or something like that. But what these films are, how they are connected to me is like in the first film, you have no images for the story, and maybe this with the second film, you have images for a certain story or history or people or whatever, maybe now and in the future. And like in INU-OH, it's the same. You don't have any, of course, you have a lot of storytelling about an ancient story, and what we referred already, and we have a new kind of interpretation of that. So this is some sort of connection I have done for myself in a way, how I wanted to connect them. Yeah, but in the end, yeah. So, well, referring to Hayden White, that about history, and that history must be read as literature. It maybe could be the same with films. That's so, yeah, you have to read the films as well as some sort of filmic expression of the certain time. Yeah.
You go first.
I mean, it's all interpretation. I mean, it's a director anyway. I mean, like Jan's films for me is I don't see it as a documentary also like fully. So, but for me, it's also like I don't need to classify it, and maybe that's just my approach to like cinema. I don't know.
It's funny, I was thinking actually at the same moment than you about interpretation, like it was going through my head, like, but in relation actually to the film you made there, and especially the title of your film, Beginning, because I think this title is so fascinating, and it's really connected, I think, to this, what we are talking about here, like the idea of digging into something and finding its origin, or like the intention of the work, or like how they might be connected, like this movement of making sense and finding like an origin in things. Maybe it's like something our brains are conditioned on. I don't know. I find this fascinating, and sometimes like we really fail doing that. But the effort is so fun, and I'm like really, I'm sorry, I'm really enjoying this.
Making sense. I think like because like maybe like I'm in like I'm researching, or I don't know, working on development. I have a specific process of development of a film, and I think nothing really makes sense. And I don't think cinema makes sense in general. So for me, it's like 2 days ago, I saw something in the street in this small town, which was just one thing, which just for me embodies everything about humanity. So then, like, why do I make films? Like, after I just see this one minute scene in front of me, then like, does it make it sense to continue to work on a film after that? I mean, like, I don't know. I don't know what making sense means in cinema. It's just or like going to the origin or the authenticity. It's also a very like questionable attempt for me usually. So even though my film is called Beginning. Yes.
Actually, are there any questions from the audience already? I mean, yeah, maybe you have some.
Yeah, join the
something
fun.
to agree or disagree on that what we are saying here.
There's one. The mic is coming.
Is it working?
Yeah. Thanks for the curation. First of all, I had a question about the title of the program today, because in comparison with the other evenings of a week of the critics, it was on the beginning of each discussion a short definition of the name, or at least of the meaning of the title of the program. For example, losing transmission, or yeah, exactly. So I would like to ask, first of all, the panel if libertine is actually, I don't know, a name of a person, or does it have actually another meaning? Because I think it will help me in sort of way to try to connect the films, because as a viewer, I'm collecting all these different opinions of the guests on this discussion, and all this input that I'm getting is helping me more and more to find the connection between the films. Of course, this is also kind of a task that I had when I came to the cinema, and I was prepared to watch 3 movies after each other. But of course, I can use all this kind of input to connect the dots. And also, the task that I had, for example, the sense that I made during watching all these movies and the dots that I connected, the similarity between the 3 films for me, it was something that I found on each three films, and the urge to tell a specific story or to express yourself. So I think this concept was present in all the films that were shown. In the first film, for example, the urge that the filmmaker had to actually make a film from the zero, actually to tell the story and to try to find everything that she could or he could to make this story visible somehow by using maybe film material from other contexts. And in the second story, the fact, I think, that we see and hear on a specific scene the filmmaker itself, who actually talks to the protagonists of the film. I think it adds a certain dimension, a certain level to the film, and somehow it disconnects from the classic idea that this is actually something, a classic, I don't know, a story that is supposed to be told, but like he's interrupting, or he's actually trying to manipulate the story in some kind of way by asking a question or by moderating it live. And he's also, he can be heard from the viewers during the film. And in the third film, of course, it was the story of the very old, this whole war for the story that were being told by the songs that were being singen. So for me, this need to tell a specific story or to try to make it visible to the public. I thought it was a connection between the three films. I don't know, maybe if it was originally an idea of the curators, but for me, it was something like I figured out during watching the three films. So yeah, that was my opinion.
Thank you for sharing that. Really, really lovely. Well, for me, I think it's really just fascinating to have all these different interpretations stand equally next to each other. There's no like hierarchical way of defining this program, and this is this is what this is about, you know. Also, like, we don't think at Critics Week that we like know the golden rule of how to curate programs. So this is also something which is intended to challenge ourselves and question how we make programs. And actually, Jasper, you've been really silent. Are you still with us?
Yes, I am. Yes, so I was just we were talking about curation. No, well, I guess I mean, my understanding of the word libertine, is, you know, I was connected with Marquis de Sade, and that's the whole idea of pleasure seeking and decadence, but with a slightly subversive sort of out of social norms, shall we say. So I mean, I can see the connection in that respect, but although I can't really see how the first one connects with that, my interpretation. So either way you align them, they don't, but I don't know. I mean, I come, because my background, I guess, primarily is as a writer, a critic, and an academic who does programming on the side. So, I mean, I like to have things that challenge my ideas, and I mean, I love that the first one, Stonebreakers. You know, from as a writer, I just love that sort of investigative sort of drive that people have, you know, in making a film. This idea of like the absent film, the absent scene in a film, that's, you know, and trying to track down the director and just following this chain and building your narrative like that. And I think Friday Night In, for me, you know, you obviously have an emotional reaction or whatever reaction you have, but it's not something I would know what to talk about it afterwards, really. I mean, it is what it is, really. In terms of, you know, what you see is what you get. I mean, I appreciate the aesthetic or the rejection of a certain aesthetic, but it doesn't have the meat on the bone for me in the way that the other two did. I do think it was, we're talking about, you know, the way that these films were put together is interesting, because we talked about, you know, animation not being often included in live action programs, or somehow being sidelined. I think that's less the case now, but Japanese animation in particular is always seen as having a particular, you know, niche audience. And I think ways of, you know, the idea of bringing it out and showing that Japanese animation is not, I mean, it has a guaranteed market, Japanese animation. You know, you have all the anime fans that watch everything, and trying to cross over to the mainstream and explain to people who aren't in that bubble what Japanese animation is very noble. And you know, to see how it connects with the other films. And I think it did connect in some ways with the first film. But like I was saying, like the Friday Night In, I didn't really see where it was in the program.
You mentioned Friday Night Stand rejects a certain aesthetic. Could you be more specific what that means?
An aesthetic of prettiness, shall we say, of artifice, of what we expect from mainstream cinema or cinema in general. You know, it's got natural lighting. It's realism. So
I feel like it also rejects porn standards.
Yes.
Like, it's totally going against that. It's just like you say, you see what you get. You get how's that go? What you see is what you get, exactly. And yeah, it's very like matter of fact, realist.
This is why I called it a documentary, actually. Even though
Which it
I
is
reject
in
these
a
categories,
way.
but that's
Totally.
why for me,
Yeah.
this would be a
Yeah.
pornographic documentary or a documented. I don't know. Yes, but therefore that's for me some sort of documentary or realism. How Jasper called it. Yeah, and maybe that's what I thought. It's doesn't really did get to me. This lack of aesthetics, like Jasper called it.
Yeah, no, but I do get it, because even for documentary, it has very specific framing and very like what you see. And like, you know, to me, I completely missed the art piece reference, but to me, it was really strange to always see half the room empty and see into the next hallway or into the bathroom. It was very particular framing that I would agree goes against a certain aesthetic, where you would assume it stays on the couch or whatever. It's, I don't know.
But like maybe like installation art as well. I mean, it's a way of, you know, I think it draws attention to the way it deviates from the more cinematic aesthetic. Don't know if I've got much more to add.
I think it's interesting that you talk about rejecting standards, and I'm wondering whether that is already an expression of like freedom or self-liberation in the idea of libertinage, like rejecting.
Trying to rescue the title.
No, I'm like, as I say, like I'm not like defining anything here, but
but you see, that's where I thought that did fit into that sort of libertinage sort of theme in a sort of low-key sort of way. I couldn't see how the first film Stonebreakers did fit into libertinage. I mean, it was much more political.
I think in the libertinage interpretation of things, rejecting moral standards is the base. I think these films are not sharing that. Maybe are they? Maybe they are.
How is his feminist strike rewriting history not going with morals?
Could you be more specific about that question?
I don't get how that would fit into your logic of the libertine being like against morals. Like, why?
Yeah, it doesn't fit.
Hmm.
We didn't call the program libertinage though, so I was just, you know, freestyling. One thing we talked about actually was, which I found really beautiful, is like this idea of whether Jan's film is kind of opening up the heart. I thought, like, for me, when I see Jan's films, they are like really touching for me. And I've seen almost all of his films, which is a lot. I think 90. Not all of them are like that, but the larger extent of his work. And like in the cinema now, it really worked for me. Like I was super touched by the film. And then there was this explosion of light and color and dance afterwards. And I was like really floating. Like it was really beautiful, that experience, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I watched it at home on a laptop, so it's obviously a completely different experience for being immersed in a cinema with an audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think that's the interesting thing about curation, is that you put something into a totally different context from what you would expect to see it. You know, I wouldn't. You know, it was quite a provocative bit of programming. I'd totally say that. But
maybe here lays the title. Maybe Libertine.
That's making the
program.
Yeah, I mean, I
it's
would
not
putting a film like that next to a Japanese animation seems slightly off whack. But I mean, that's I understand Bea's discussion, you know, her rationale that, you know, it's not about the genre, or it's about the emotional response you get from the film. I mean, I got very different emotional responses from each of the films, so that's a curiosity point, yeah. But I mean, I don't know what the audience thought, so that's
Another comment from your side. There's a hand. There should also be a mic in the hand. Here in the front. Here in the front. Yeah, I'll get some whiskey in the meantime, if you don't mind.
Hi. Yeah, I just to like throw in something like into the discussion, I found it interesting that you until now try to figure out the connection between all the three films together. But I think maybe another perspective would be to see how they progress in time. So for me, it's not necessary to connect all three with each other, but maybe the Stonebreakers connects to Friday Night Stand, and then Friday Night Stand progresses towards INU-OH, and I found that an interesting connection. And also, like, in terms of curating, I would also think, like, I found it also funny. So for me, there is like a lot of humor in the selection, and that's like nice. I enjoyed that it was like surprising and funny. So that's like another idea about curating I had. And about the connection between Friday Night Stand and INU-OH, I found it really, really funny in Friday Night Stand how this guy commented on the body of the other guy. Like, he was like, oh my God, you're so fat. Like, how can you eat so late in the night? And this is like maybe a bit flat, but I'm throwing it out to you to discuss if you feel like like this aspect of body and deformity and like non-normative bodies that is in both films present. So yeah, that would be another connection from my perspective.
Yeah, I like the connection a lot. Like the other thing that when you said, oh, it opened your heart, like I thought, well, another bit cheesy connection might be the, you know, the matter of fact acceptance of the two in Jan's film, but also the main characters in INU-OH. Like that there is, you know, it is what it is, and they like each other, or like they get it on, or, you know, like do what they do, and that's might be also a connection there, as well as the one with the body. I really like that one. Yeah.
How about the others? Would you like to comment on that angle? There's another comment. Oh wow, the mic is fast.
I like that. It's becoming like the film club conversation, you know?
Yes.
So for me, it was quite obvious that the title relates to the freedom of curating and the freedom of you putting together a program that would not necessarily actually connect, and the films rejecting each other in some ways, and the films being, you know, each on their own and really existing for themselves in their way, how they're conceived, and maybe laying a trap or something to the people trying to find the connections. That's it.
No trap.
I can maybe reply with a thing we talked about when we were making programs at Critics Week. When we saw a lot of recent films, we noticed there's a very interesting kind of style of filmmaking happening a lot at film festivals, which we described as mutant cinema. Films like changing direction within the film. Like they start in a particular way and then they really transform. Like we've showed a film a few days ago, Nosferatu, which I think is really like a mutant film. It starts as a fiction about Columbus and Columbus being a vampire, then it becomes a documentary, then it becomes a stoner film and a documentary and a music film, and it's like this really fascinating way of making films, which is informed by knowing so much about cinema, you know, like we have seen all these styles of cinema being present in the film world. And some filmmakers, they just found ways of mixing all these influences into new bodies of films in a way. And I feel like this program is really, to me, is really a mutant program also. And like maybe
So
the
it's a
film
bit
in
like
itself.
Frankenstein. You put all these different
In a
ones
way,
together to
maybe.
one body.
Maybe I like that idea a lot. I find it really, really great. How about you? Another angle? Some new concepts? Ah, there's one.
I had another question about the aspect of curating the evening. I've noticed in the last two evenings of the festival that the shortest, of course, there were more than just one film, and the shortest films were usually on the beginning of the evening, and the longest ones were usually on the end of the evening. For me, it was kind of a challenge, especially today after 3 films. After the third film was almost at the end, to actually try to remember what was the film that I saw in the middle, because I needed some kind of time to remember what it is. And I wanted to ask a question to the audience, or maybe to the panel, if what is the importance of the specific order of showing the movies, and is there something that you thought about it, or is it just a random selection, or just a random decision that you made by deciding to put the shortest films on the beginning and the longest one on the end?
That was no choice. Like the length of the films was not important.
But I think he's asking about the order of them.
I guess traditionally shorts have always preceded feature-length films, you know, since the pre-war period. You know, it's always been the case. I've had problems as a curator. I think when you're curating programs entirely of shorts, if you get one film that's significantly longer, because I mean a short can cover anything up to about 40 minutes technically. The films are substantially longer than others tend to overshadow the other films, and people do get bored as well. I mean, I've got quite a short attention span, so I don't like doing programs over 2 hours. I also have this thing where I don't think any documentary should be over 75 minutes, because they always lose steam in the last 15 minutes. Unless you've got obviously a very long 4-hour-long documentary or something like that, where you're actually within the rhythms of it. But in terms of feature films, you know, I think, I mean, I've noticed a lot in Japanese films as well. The pacing is completely off. You know, it's like a feature film would often be about 126 minutes when they could have easily just been cut down to 90 minutes. But that's a different thing. But yeah, I know that people's attention spans do tend to wander, and obviously if you have 2 long shorts before a feature, that is quite a challenge, I think, for audiences, in my opinion.
So you didn't watch the films in a row. That was your conclusion.
Well, I watched them at home, obviously. I didn't you know, I mean, obviously if in a festival situation in a cinema, you would watch them all in a row, because, you know, and that's why I like going to festivals, because you are literally forced to have that discipline imposed on you. You have to go and see a film at a certain time, and you know it's going to reach a certain time, you know, and as opposed to watching stuff off links when you're pausing and making cups of tea and doing other stuff.
I mean, we watched the film today as well, first time in this order.
Me?
Me too. So, yeah. How was it for you, Dennis?
Well, the first time, Well, as I said, like the connection between Jan's film and the feature was like really emotionally was really intense. And well, at some point I thought it was like I thought about the idea of synthesis, like the first film being all about history and reinterpreting history, and then the second film being like really emotional and like physical, and then like the animation bringing it all together in one thing, and then having the mutating body and overcoming gender, and like having this beautiful friendship which also closes the film, and it's like this really nice angle of love. And yeah, but I didn't like, this came during the screening, so this was what came up, like this idea of synthesis. Now I totally want to write about it, like it's so interesting. But I think it's just one angle, like I think maybe answering to Frederick also, like this idea of laying a trap, I think like for me it wouldn't be like a way of curating. I think it's really harsh or like manipulative towards the audience. I wouldn't want to do that. So this is like not designed to have traps for you or like lead you the wrong way or anything. Like, yeah, this wouldn't be an idea we would have, or at least I wouldn't. Nobody of us had it. No. So we just interpreted the films. Like finding this title came after the films. We never pick concepts or titles before we picked the films. So we followed Dea's emotional approach to Jan's film and the animation. Then we found another layer to put in the program, and finding a title came all in the end. And it's also something we did over here, and like, hey Dea, we have a title now. So it was all a conversation, and it's like ongoing. Yeah.
And I think the title is more sometimes an association than actually a title. So, and the association can be very loose as well, and an emotion in that way. So, yeah. So you can't really break this one title down to all the films in the same weight, maybe as well. Yeah. Hope that's okay for.
I think it's still an interesting convention, right? I mean, at least I can speak for myself because I've been going to festivals and curated festivals, I don't know, 20 years. And to me, it's like the same as when you learn about poetry in school. You learn the title means something and every stanza means something, and you try to bring it all together. And I think that's what at least I was trying to work with, because that's the convention you have. You try to bring meaning together, and that is not so straightforward is of course also fun. But still, there is this urge to try to find a connection to each of the pieces.
Yeah, it's like trying to find the sense of a narration as well. So yeah, and sometimes there is no sense.
Yeah, and it depends on the angle you take, like when you watch things, how much time you spend with it, how you see it. And the other day when we talked about Nosferatu, there was Bailey, one of the directors. He gave this really beautiful metaphor about, or like Adam also, the second director of the film. They were comparing their work or their aesthetic concept with food. And Adam was talking about it being like a stew, like a soup, a thick soup, and and Adam was and Bailey was talking about the idea of the border between a sandwich and a salad. And he was like, this moment when you are not sure whether it's still a sandwich or already a salad because you put so much into the sandwich. But I think it's not just a beautiful metaphor for talking about things like that, but it's also like, it came to mind to me that it's so interesting to talk about aesthetics in a way of nourishing us. Like we are like feeding off this program now for almost 2 hours, and we can't stop talking about it because there's so much in that. And I find it so beautiful, like this idea of having like art as something nourishing us and like, yeah, giving us all this energy to like, yeah.
It goes with another good metaphor. Like there's a really nice essay about curating by Laura Marks, which is called something like, oh, now of course I forget the title, but it's something like having that curating works the way you would curate a dinner conversation, so that you have the different courses and you invite certain kinds of friends or guests that would fit to each other, and that comes to mind with the food metaphor as well. Yeah.
That's interesting.
I think Dea wants to add something to that.
No, I just go back to the question about aesthetics in Jan's film, or refusing cinematic. Like maybe what it does, it like refuses the conventional framing in a way. But for me, it has a lot of aesthetics. I mean, it has aesthetics of its own, which it creates within a film. And I really continue to think about these people, and maybe that's what was fascinating for me about a film, things that I don't know about the people in a film. And it allows me to create my own history in a way in my head, like a history also. And maybe that's how it's also connected with to other films, because I constantly go back and add something or think about something with these two characters.
It's interesting that the film has these gaps, right? Like all the time in the film, the screen turns black for moments, and it feels like there was an endless gap, but the scene seems to continue. There seems to be no time gap. So, how about you? You're ready to go to the bar? Let's do that. Thank you all so much for being here with us and trying to deal with all these ideas of freedom. It's difficult to handle, I know. Well, it was really beautiful. Thank you so much for your patience and your time. Thank you, Dea.
Yeah, thank you, Dea. Thank you, Jasper, for joining us as well.
Thank you, Skadi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Petra and Dennis, for including me in the group for curating this program. It was very interesting to have all the conversations with you and to try to make sense of what I thought about curation like before. I still don't quite understand. Thank you. And for sharing all the films with me, all the films that I watched, because it was incredible, all the entire list that I got.
Thank you all for being part of the dinner. Good night.